Welcome back to Visionary Audiobook. This is part 2 of What If a Secret Agent Was Reincarnated to Naruto as a Teacher. I hope you enjoy this journey as much as I've enjoyed creating it for you. Chapter 4, The Ultimate Taijutsu. The moon hung high above the village, casting a faint silver light over the rooftops as I made my way home. Each step felt heavier, the weight of the day's events settling in. Today had been eventful. The training session at the academy, my encounter with the students, and that sparring match with Sasuke, it all felt like a build-up. My body hummed with energy, the adrenaline of the day still coursing through me. But more than that, I had an overwhelming sense that something important was coming. The kind of feeling you get right before everything changes. I reached my apartment door, my hand resting on the handle. The cool weatherwood felt smooth under my palm. It was strange. This apartment felt oddly familiar. But I knew it wasn't my own. It belonged to the body I inhabited, a part of the person I was now. Yet, it still felt like it was waiting for something, waiting for me to step inside and unlock the next chapter of my life. I pushed the door open, stepping into the quiet space. The room was just as I left it earlier, modest, yet comfortable. The scent of wood and faint traces of incense lingered in the air. Nothing in here screamed anything extraordinary, and yet there was an odd sense of history that I couldn't quite shake. The living room was small, just enough to fit a couch, a low table, and a few bookshelves filled with scrolls and trinkets. The atmosphere was warm, like it had been lived in for years, with an air of quiet solitude. But it wasn't the living room that caught my attention. No! It was the basement. My parents in this life, had made sure that the basement was hidden, a safeguard for me, for whatever may come. It was a secret, a place where I could train without anyone knowing, a place where the real power was meant to be unlocked. I headed toward the bedroom. It was ordinary in every sense. A bed covered in soft sheets, a simple desk cluttered with papers and the occasional unfinished task, a closet that held my clothes, a shelf with a few scrolls stacked on top of one another, clearly just barely organized. But there was something else, something that felt off, something that felt important. At the far end of the room, hanging against the wall, was a mirror. It wasn't just any mirror. The frame was ornate, with intricate carvings that seemed to tell stories of old. The wood was dark, aged with time but well cared for, giving the mirror an antique quality. It was large, so large it almost felt like part of the room's design itself, blending seamlessly into the space. I approached it slowly, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. There was something about this mirror that called to me, something hidden just beneath the surface. I placed my hand on the mirror's frame, my fingers brushing against the smooth wood, and paused. I needed to make sure no one was watching. There were too many eyes in this village, too many people who could sense when something wasn't quite right. I focused, narrowing my senses. For a moment, I thought I caught a flicker, a shift in the air, but it was gone almost as quickly as it appeared. No one. I was alone. I exhaled a quiet breath, my mind clearing. Time to see what was really behind this mirror. I gathered chakra into my hand, feeling the familiar surge of energy flow through my body. I channeled it into my palm, the sensation humming as I pressed my hand against the glass. The mirror pulsed faintly, a soft blue glow spreading from where my fingers made contact. A click sounded from within the frame, followed by a shimmering ripple across the surface. Like the mirror was no longer just a reflection of the room. It was revealing something else, a hidden passage. The surface of the mirror twisted, showing an outline of a path leading downward beneath the floorboards, a pathway that had always been there, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. I stepped back, a slow smile spreading across my face. Well done, parents of this world. You could have made excellent secret agents, with the level of care and cunning in this place. With a sense of pride, I pushed forward, stepping through the now visible doorway and down into the hidden depths of the basement. The air grew cooler as I descended, the faint scent of old paper and stone filling my nose. The stairs creaked underfoot, their age undeniable, but the space below was a testament to secrecy. The basement itself was divided into 3 distinct rooms, each more fascinating than the last. The first room I entered was a library. The shelves were lined with ancient scrolls, many of them written in characters I didn't immediately recognize. I could sense the weight of forbidden knowledge in the air. jutsu that no one outside these walls should ever know. Beyond the library was the treasury room, its doors opening to reveal weapons and relics of a long-forgotten time. Swords, kunai, shuriken, and even strange, ornate artifacts I didn't recognize filled the space. Some of the weapons seemed mundane. Others were etched with symbols of old, their power still palpable. But it was the final room that drew my attention. This was the largest of them all, its walls reinforced with chakra to keep the room secure. This was a training room, a space so vast it could easily accommodate dozens of shinobi practicing simultaneously. The floor was smooth, perfect for any kind of training, and the walls were marked with subtle carvings, chakra lines that reinforced the very foundation of the room. I stepped into the center of the room, the cool air brushing against my skin as I sank into a lotus position, closing my eyes. It was time to begin, time to find out what this body was truly capable of. Memories began to surface, fragments of knowledge, flashes of jutsus, techniques, and styles I had inherited. It was like flipping through a stack of notes, each one representing a piece of this body's skill set. I focused, trying to sift through the haze of memories. I could feel the power of this body, the potential it held. It was vast, far greater than I had expected. I know the main 3 Academy D-rank jutsus. I thought the basics that every shinobi learns. Plus, for C-rank jutsus, 2 B-rank jutsus, and 2 A-rank jutsus. But it wasn't just the ninjutsu that stood out to me. It was the taijutsu, the combat style that ran in my blood. I smirked to myself as I recalled the fighting style. Hashinryu, the star god style of the Tenshin clan. It was a taijutsu that emphasized divine guidance, precision, and the ability to strike with perfect timing. It wasn't just about brute strength. It was about using speed, agility, and deceptive tactics to overwhelm an opponent before they even had a chance to react. Every move was calculated. Every strike was part of a greater purpose. It was a style that embodied both physical and philosophical mastery of combat. But there was also my own creation, the style I had refined in my past life. Shinjukyu, the heart beast rush, a combination of speed, agility, precision, and timing, pushed to their absolute limits. Those who mastered the style were capable of moving faster than the eye could follow, manipulating the flow of battle to make every strike inevitable. The heart beast rush wasn't just about defeating an opponent. It was about controlling the very tempo of the fight, making victory unavoidable. The realization struck me hard. These 2 styles were far more than just complementary. They were the foundation of something even greater. If I could combine the precision of Hashinryu with the deadly speed of Shinjukyu, I could create a fighting style that was unstoppable. A style that no one, not even the strongest opponents, would be able to counter. That would be my goal for the coming weeks. To meld these 2 styles into a perfect union, something beyond the sum of their parts. I opened my eyes, my gaze sharp with purpose. It was time to begin. I rose from the floor, taking a deep breath as I set my mind on the task ahead. The next few weeks would be dedicated to perfecting my taijutsu, refining my speed, and testing my limits. And when I was finished, I would possess a fighting style that would be the ultimate weapon, the ultimate taijutsu, and nothing would stand in my way. Chapter 5, News of the New Sensei. The night was still, and the light of the moon cast a soft glow over the village of Konoha. Inside the Nara household, the warm aroma of dinner lingered in the air as Shikamaru and his father, Shikaku, sat quietly at the dining table. The father, ever the strategist, looked up only briefly from his food, glancing at his son. "You seem deep in thought, Shikamaru," Shikaku commented, his voice neutral, but with a hint of curiosity. Shikamaru lowered his chopsticks and gave his father a side glance. "Do you know someone named Tenshin Shido?" he asked, his tone casual but carrying an edge of intrigue. Shikaku paused mid-bite, his gaze flickering slightly, though he quickly masked it with his usual calm demeanor. Tenshin Shido, you say? Why do you ask?" Shikamaru leaned back in his chair. "He's my new teacher. We had a class today and, well, it was different. He got Choji to actually take a fight seriously without even offering food as a bribe. And even though he's just a chunin, his presence in the classroom was almost as commanding as yours, or even some of the clan heads." Shikaku raised an eyebrow, a slight surprise in his expression. "He inspired Choji, huh?" he murmured, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I suppose teachers are meant to encourage their students, after all." Shikamaru frowned, a puzzled expression crossing his face. Most teachers just teach the stuff we already know, or they stick to boring topics. But this guy, Tendashin Shido, taught Naruto something no one else could. In just a few minutes, he helped Naruto with his chakra control, something no one could do for him. And it worked. Shikaka stiffened at the mention of Naruto's name, but he quickly hid it with a composed expression. Really? Naruto, you say? That's impressive, considering how difficult he can be to teach. Shikamaru nodded, looking thoughtful. Yeah. In 3 minutes, Naruto was able to balance 20 leaves on his head. That was something. And for some reason, I get the feeling that Tendashin Shido knows what he's doing. Even if I don't fully understand why yet. Shikaku leaned back in his chair, his expression pensive. I see. What do you think of him, Shikamaru? Shikamaru finished his dinner and pushed his plate aside, deep in thought. I think he's passionate, but there's something more to him. He's going to change the way the academy works, somehow. But I don't know how yet. He stood up, preparing to leave the table. Good night, Dad. Shikaka nodded, watching his son head for the stairs. After a few moments of silence, his face hardened. Tendashin Shido, he muttered to himself, his voice low and thoughtful. I need to find out more about him. Meanwhile, at the Akimichi household, Choji was practicing his forms in a small room at the back of the house. His father, Choza, walked by, pausing as he noticed his son lying on the floor, clearly exhausted. Choji, what's with this sudden determination? Choza asked, his deep voice carrying a hint of surprise. Choji sat up slowly, wiping sweat from his brow. It's because of my new sensei. Tendashin Shido, he said, catching his breath. He said something today that made me think. He told me that the strength I wield is the strength to protect others. Choza blinked, taken aback by his son's words. That's a good lesson, he said with a smile, a warmth in his eyes that softened his usual stoic demeanor. A good lesson indeed. Yeah, Choji replied, his face lighting up with newfound determination. I'm going to train harder, Dad. Choza nodded approvingly. All right, that's enough for today. You need to rest up for the academy tomorrow. Choji agreed, getting up to take a shower before bed. Choza watched him leave the room, a thoughtful look crossing his face. I should meet this Tendashin Shido, he muttered under his breath, wondering just what kind of teacher had inspired such a change in his son. Across town in the Aburame household, Shino walked silently through the clan corridors, his usual stoic expression betraying little of what was on his mind. He approached his father's study and knocked softly on the door. Father, may I speak to you about a certain matter? Shino asked, his voice calm, but carrying an air of seriousness. A neutral voice from behind the door responded, Come in, Shino. Shino slid open the door and stepped inside, finding his father, Shibi, seated at his desk, going over some paperwork. Shibi glanced up at his son, his expression unreadable. What is it, Shino? Am I troubling you? Shino didn't waste time with pleasantries. There's a new teacher at the academy named Tendashin Shido. He has made an impact on the class, and I believe he is worth observing. Shibi set his pen down, his interest piqued. An impact, you say? What makes you think this is worth noting? Shino continued, his tone measured. I ordered some of my insects to trail him, to get a feel for his chakra. But they refused, saying that Tendashin Shido is a terrifying being. Yet, despite that, he appears to genuinely care for the class. Shibi's expression remained neutral, but a flicker of intrigue passed through his eyes. You've been observing him, then? Yes, Shino replied. But there's something off about him. I plan to continue observing. Shibi thought for a moment. Very well. Keep your observations quiet, and do not take anything at face value. Shino nodded and turned to leave, but his father's voice stopped him. I will inquire about him with the third Hokage, Shibi said. As Shino exited the room, leaving his father to his thoughts. Elsewhere in the Hyuga compound, Hinata walked nervously down the hall toward the elders' meeting room. She was apprehensive, knowing that her progress had been a topic of discussion for her father, Hayashi Hyuga, and the other clan elders. Inside the room, Hayashi sat at the head of the table, his usual serious demeanor in place. The elders were discussing Hinata's perceived lack of progress, and the words they spoke only made Hinata feel smaller. She's weak, one elder commented, their voice cold and dismissive. Perhaps it's time to pull her from the academy. She's not improving as expected. Hinata's heart sank, and her eyes welled with tears, but she kept her head bowed, trying to remain invisible. Hayashi, though clearly frustrated, kept his composure. All of the clan heirs are in her class. It is only right that we send her as well, he said, his tone firm but not harsh. Why send her if she can't even improve her skills? Another elder questioned. She doesn't show the attitude of a future clan head. Hinata winced at their words, but she could feel something stirring inside her, a surge of courage she hadn't expected. Then the conversation shifted, and one of the elders brought up Naruto. The yellow-haired brat can't even do basic chakra control. What's the point in continuing his training? They said, clearly mocking him. That was all it took. Hinata's face flushed with anger, and before she could stop herself, she spoke up, her voice strong and resolute. Tendishin Shido-sensei has helped Naruto-kun with chakra control. In just a few minutes, he was able to balance 20 leaves on his head. He's improving, and I believe he can do even more. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to her. The elders, startled by her sudden outburst, exchanged surprised glances. Hayashi, however, simply raised an eyebrow. Tell me more about this Tendishin Shido, he asked, his tone neutral, but his eyes revealing an interest he hadn't shown before. Hinata, feeling the weight of their gaze, lowered her eyes shyly but managed to continue. He's a new teacher. He helped Naruto and Choji in a way none of the other teachers could. Hayashi thought for a moment, his gaze distant. I've heard that name before. Tendishin. I can't quite place it. The elder's eyes narrowed. We will need to monitor him. Hayashi nodded slowly. For now, Hinata will remain in the academy, but if there is no improvement in the next 3 years, we may have to reconsider. Hinata bit her lip, but she nodded obediently, feeling a mixture of relief and trepidation. At the Yamanaka household, Ino sat on her bed, deep in thought about the events of the day. Her mind kept returning to Tendishin Shido, the new teacher. He seemed different. Though she had no idea why, she found herself thinking about him more than she expected. Even Sasuke Uchiha couldn't land a blow on him, and Choji, her lazy friend, had actually fought seriously for once. Her father, Inoichi, opened the door to her room and smiled. "Good night, princess," he began, but then noticed the thoughtful look on his daughter's face. "Everything all right at school today?" Ino hesitated before answering. "There's a new teacher. His name's Tendishin Shido, and he's been helping a lot of students, more than the other teachers." Inoichi raised an eyebrow. "Really? From what you've seen, is he a good teacher?" Ino made a face. "I'm not sure. Sometimes his eyes get this scary look, like he's scanning us, studying us." Inoichi furrowed his brow. I'll look into it, but you shouldn't concern yourself about it. Just focus on your studies." Ino nodded and smiled weakly. "Good night, Dad." "Good night, Ino," he replied, turning off the light and closing the door behind him. But as he did, his face turned serious. "Tendishin Shido," he muttered, "I need to find out who you really are." In the Inazuka household, some Inazuka was lounging on the couch when Kiba walked in, eager to boast about his latest day at the academy. "I couldn't believe it, Mom," Kiba said excitedly. "Sasuke couldn't land a hit on him, not even once." Some raised an eyebrow. "I'm sure. You're still just a pup. Sasuke's not even close to being on par with a Chunin." Kiba grinned, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Well, Tendishin Shido made a bet with the class. If any of us could land a hit on him, he'd personally create a taijutsu style tailored just for that person." Some was intrigued. "A taijutsu style, you say? And what do you get if you win?" Kiba smirked. "I'll have a taijutsu style that's mine alone, and no one else can use it." Some leaned forward, clearly interested. "You think you can beat him?" Kiba's grin faded, and he grew dead serious. "No, I wouldn't win. Not yet." Some blinked, surprised by the change in her son's demeanor. She hadn't expected Kiba to be so humble. The challenge was real, then. With a predatory grin, Some thought to herself that she needed to meet this Tendishin Shido and see just what kind of man could make her son so serious. At the Haruno household, Sakura sat at the dinner table, lost in thought. Her parents were busy with their evening routine, but she couldn't stop thinking about her new teacher. "He's nice enough," Sakura said, her voice uncertain. "But there's something off about him. Something strange." Her father raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I'm not sure," Sakura admitted. "But he embarrassed Sasuke-kun today. I don't know how I feel about that." Her mother laughed. "Oh, Sakura, you need to fight for your love. If you like Sasuke-kun, go for it." Sakura blushed, but her father groaned, rubbing his forehead. "Not this again." The final scene that night was in the desolate Uchiha compound, where Sasuke walked alone, reflecting on the day's events. His thoughts were filled with frustration and resolve. Tenshin Shido had easily beaten him in their spar, but Sasuke was determined to improve. If Naruto and Choji could get better so quickly, so could he. A brief flash of his older brother, Itachi, crossed his mind. Anger flared in his chest. He wouldn't stay weak for long. And finally, in the dead of night, Tenshin Shido sat alone in his room, reflecting on the day's events. After hours of intense taijutsu training, he felt a sneeze building up. "Who's talking about me?" he muttered to himself with a wry grin. Chapter 6. Reevaluation of the Learning Curriculum. The morning air was crisp, and the sky stretched out in a shade of soft blue. As I walked through the streets of Konoha, the familiar scent of freshly baked bread and the sounds of villagers going about their daily routines provided a strange sense of comfort. It felt like any other day, but my thoughts were far from normal. Today, I was about to confront something that had been gnawing at me since I first stepped foot in the academy. The Ninja Academy's curriculum. As I approached the school, the tall building with its well-worn steps seemed to loom over me. The institution had been established for years, and yet, from what I had observed, it felt woefully inadequate for what the students truly needed to survive in the brutal ninja world. Their lessons were too focused on theory, too disconnected from the realities that awaited them once they graduated. If we were to truly prepare the next generation of ninjas, we had to equip them with far more than just textbook knowledge. The academy had its merits, no doubt, but it was clear to me that it needed a massive overhaul. And that's exactly what I intended to do. As I entered the school grounds, I spotted Irika-sensei waiting by the entrance. His usual warm smile greeted me, but I could see the apprehension in his eyes. I could tell that he, too, had his doubts about the current curriculum. After all, he'd been a part of this system for so long. He was one of the few instructors who truly cared about the students, but even he couldn't ignore the gaps that were beginning to show. "Good morning, Tenshin," Irika said, his voice friendly but with a touch of uncertainty. "Ready to start the day?" I nodded, my gaze turning toward the academy's door. "More than ready, Irika. But before we go in, I've been thinking about the curriculum. The students aren't being prepared properly. It's all too theoretical. They're being trained as if the world out there will be as simple as these classrooms." Irika frowned, clearly taking my words to heart. "What do you suggest? We've been using the same curriculum for years now. Changing things up is going to be difficult." "I agree," I said, pulling out a small notebook from my jacket pocket. "But sometimes difficult changes are necessary. Take a look at this." I handed the notebook to him, my hand brushing against his as he took it. He opened the notebook, his eyes scanning the contents, and I could see the shock in his expression as he read the list. Stealth training, adequate chakra control, hand-sealed training, physical fitness, surveillance training, ninja history, espionage and intelligence gathering, kunai and shuriken throwing, communication skills, leadership and teamwork management, survival training, escape and evasion. Irika's eyes widened as he read aloud. This is a lot," he said, looking up at me with a raised eyebrow. "You really think all of this can be taught in just 2 years?" "Definitely," I replied without hesitation, my voice firm. I could feel my resolve tightening in my chest. The students need to be exposed to all aspects of being a ninja, and it's our job to push them. You, of all people, should know that sometimes students don't realize their potential until we challenge them. Irika looked at me for a moment, as if weighing my words. There was a flicker of understanding in his eyes, but I could tell he was still processing the enormity of what I was proposing. "You're right," he said finally. "It's just, I never thought we could push them this hard." "Well, we're not just preparing them to pass a test," I said, my voice low but intense. We're preparing them for a world where failure isn't just an embarrassment, it's deadly. With that, we continued walking down the corridor, the sound of our footsteps echoing through the empty hallways. Irika held the notebook close to his chest, mulling over the list of subjects I proposed. I could sense his hesitation, but I also saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. Maybe, just maybe, he was starting to see the vision I had for these kids. As we approached the classroom, we could already hear the chatter of the students, their voices rising in a cacophony of excitement and distraction. The door to the class was ajar, and as we stepped inside, the noise became even more pronounced. Irika, ever the good teacher, tried to quiet them. "All right, everyone quiet down," he said, his voice rising just a bit. But the students continued to talk amongst themselves, too caught up in their own conversations to heed his call. Irika's face reddened in frustration, and I could see a vein start to pop on his temple as he prepared to yell. Before he could, I stepped forward, my voice calm, but carrying an unspoken authority. "Settle down," I said, my eyes sweeping over the class. I didn't raise my voice, but I let the power in my words carry through the room. The effect was instantaneous. The students froze, all eyes turning to me. The noise died down almost immediately, and the room grew still. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle in before continuing. Irika looked at me with a grateful expression, giving me a nod of acknowledgement before addressing the class. "All right, students," he began. "We've decided to make some changes to your curriculum, starting today." The students blinked in surprise, their whispers filling the air once more as they processed the news. There were murmurs of disbelief, excitement, and even some trepidation. Some of them looked eager to dive into the new material, while others seemed less than thrilled about the idea of additional work. Irika continued, listing off the new subjects that would be integrated into their daily lessons. "We'll be focusing more on hands-on training, stealth, chakra control, survival techniques, physical fitness." There was a noticeable shift in the room. Sasuke, ever the stoic, didn't show any outward signs of excitement, but I could tell by the way his eyes narrowed that he was intrigued. Kiba practically bounced in his seat, his energy infectious. Even Choji, the ever-reluctant one when it came to physical exercise, seemed oddly motivated by the idea of learning more practical skills. Ino, Shino, and Hinata were quieter, their expressions more neutral, but I could see that their interest was piqued, if only slightly. And then there was Shikamaru, who slumped in his seat, clearly dreading the idea of more work. Sakura, too, looked a bit overwhelmed, even though she was one of the top students in terms of academic performance. She hated physical training, and I could tell that the idea of running obstacle courses didn't sit well with her. "Now," I said, my voice light but teasing, "let's learn about history." The groans of displeasure filled the room instantly, and I couldn't help but chuckle at the collective sound of despair. Irika, ever the optimist, jumped in with a smile. "History is important, you know. We need to learn from the past in order to handle the challenges of the future." 2 hours passed with Irika teaching the students about the history of the Hokage position. He explained the stories behind each of the Hokage's reigns, and the students listened, albeit begrudgingly. They learned that the first Hokage had been known as the god of shinobi due to his overwhelming strength, but had died before the first great ninja war. The second Hokage, the inventor, had created many of the ninjutsu used by Konoha ninjas today, but had also died in the first shinobi war. The third Hokage, known as the second god of shinobi, had mastered all 5 chakra transformations and was called the Professor for his vast knowledge of jutsu. Finally, the fourth Hokage, the Yellow Flash, was famous for single-handedly defeating 1,000 IWA ninjas during the Third Shinobi War before sacrificing his life to save the village from the Kyuubi attack. The students, while initially bored, seemed to take in the weight of these historical facts. And although it wasn't the most exciting lesson, I knew that it was an essential one. The past had shaped the present, and in their hands, the future of Konoha rested. The bell rang, signaling break time, and the students jumped from their seats almost immediately, eager to escape the classroom. Irika sighed, watching them scatter. "They always want the practical side," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "Never the theory." I chuckled, crossing my arms. "It's our job to make it interesting, Irika. Make them see the value in the lessons they don't immediately understand." With that, I excused myself and walked out of the classroom. Irika called after me, asking where I was going. Setting up the physical training area for the next class, I said, flashing him a sweet, calculating smile. Physical training? He repeated, raising an eyebrow. I nodded. In my past life, secret agents had to go through trials and tribulations. This training is meant to put them on edge while also helping them build their physical strength. It's called a gauntlet. As I made my way to the empty training field, a devious smile crept across my face. Let's see how they handle this, I thought. The gauntlet was about to begin. Chapter 7, The Gauntlet. The bell rang through the academy grounds, its sharp chimes signaling the start of what was bound to be a brutal day of training. As I stepped out into the courtyard, I could already hear the excited chatter of the students, their voices rising in anticipation of whatever fun I had in store for them today. I smirked to myself, feeling the familiar surge of excitement run through me. Today, they were going to learn just how far they could push themselves. I watched as the students lined up outside the training area, their faces filled with curiosity and nervous energy. The air was thick with tension, and for a brief moment, I wondered if they could feel the weight of what was about to happen. Then they saw it. The Genin obstacle course stretched out before them like a labyrinth of challenges, designed to test everything a young shinobi needed to survive in the harsh world they were training for. There were rope swings hanging from towering trees, steep slopes that led down into muddy pits, a treacherous gorge with falling boulders, and a fast-flowing river that seemed to promise more trouble than anyone was prepared for. At the far end, barely visible, was a tranquil chakra pool, waiting to end their ordeal. All right, everyone, Irika's voice rang out, trying to calm the rising murmurs of shock and confusion. His eyes scanned the field, and I could see the confusion building behind his usual calm demeanor. He was standing just a few paces behind the students, his gaze flicking between me and the obstacle course. Shido, Irika called out, his voice carrying a note of disbelief. When exactly did you have the time to set all this up? I grinned, my arms crossed over my chest as I looked out over the course. That, Irika, is a trade secret, I said, flashing him an amused smile. Irika shot me a half-exasperated, half-astonished look. A trade secret, huh? You've got quite the way of getting things done. I shrugged, tapping the edge of my chin thoughtfully. A shinobi is always prepared for any situation. And this. Well, this is just part of it. Now, everyone listen up. I turned toward the students, who had fallen silent, all eyes fixed on me with varying degrees of trepidation. This course is designed to push you, physically and mentally. The goal is simple. Get to the finish line as quickly as you can. It doesn't matter how you do it, but speed is key. I watched as their expressions shifted, some looking eager, others a little uncertain. Anyone who takes longer than 5 minutes to finish will be marked as incomplete. If you can't make it past the obstacles, you'll need to rethink your strategy. A few gasps and murmurs followed my statement, but I could tell that most of them were fired up. The challenge was set, and there was no backing out now. All right, first up, I continued. Sasuke Uchiha, step forward. Sasuke, the ever-stoic Uchiha heir, didn't flinch. He walked confidently to the starting line, his eyes already scanning the course as if mentally preparing for every obstacle. As he stood at the edge, I gave him a nod. On your mark, get set, go. And just like that, the gauntlet began. Sasuke darted forward like a blur. His speed was incredible. He was already past the chakra activation gate in seconds, manipulating his chakra expertly to open the gate without a moment's hesitation. He raced through the forest of agility, leaping from tree to tree, his movements precise and calculated. No ropes, no vines, no unstable platforms could slow him down. Sasuke was in his element. He reached the boulder roll with time to spare. But even he wasn't immune to the challenge. The massive boulder was heavy, and Sasuke had to use all his strength to shift it just enough to make a path. He strained, sweat beading on his forehead, but in the end, he pushed it aside and continued on. He navigated the hidden traps with ease, his sharp eyes catching every tripwire and swinging log before they could pose any real threat. The mudslide was next, and it was here that Sasuke's pace slowed ever so slightly. The slippery, uneven surface challenged even his speed, but he kept his footing, pressing forward until he was through the worst of it. The water crossing was nothing he couldn't handle. He hopped across small stone slabs across the surface of the river, as though it were nothing more than solid ground. A few rocks and branches were no match for him. Finally, Sasuke reached the wall of might. His muscles tensed as he began to scale the jagged surface, relying on his strength to climb the rock face. He was fast, but even Sasuke's determination wasn't enough to avoid the few moments of struggle as he climbed. When he hit the endurance sprint, his exhaustion showed. Even Sasuke couldn't outrun the toll this course took on the body, but his speed and resolve pushed him through. With a final burst of energy, he leapt over the chasm and skidded across the finish line, panting but triumphant. The time flashed up on the screen, 4 minutes and 3 seconds. Sasuke wiped the sweat from his brow, glancing back at the rest of the class, who were watching with wide eyes. He didn't say a word, he didn't need to. "Nice work, Sasuke," I said, nodding in approval. Next up, Kiba Inuzuka. Kiba's performance was nothing like Sasuke's calm precision, but he was no less impressive. With Akamaru by his side, Kiba charged forward, using his natural speed to blast through the obstacles. The chakra activation gate was a breeze, though Kiba didn't hesitate to yell a challenge at the gate itself before rushing through. In the force of agility, Kiba moved with an energy that was as wild as it was effective. He didn't always take the cleanest route, but his agility and raw determination got him through each obstacle. Akamaru even helped him out a few times, leaping across branches or pulling him along when needed. The boulder roll slowed him down just as it had Sasuke, but Kiba was more than capable of moving the massive rock with his brute strength. By the time he reached the hidden traps, though, the challenge was starting to wear on him. A tripwire caught his foot, sending him stumbling into a pitfall, but he quickly recovered, his reflexes saving him from the worst of the fall. When he reached the mudslide, Kiba's energy seemed to flag a little. The slippery surface was difficult to navigate, but Akamaru's guidance kept him from losing ground. The water crossing was no problem, though. Like Sasuke, Kiba used the stone slabs, though he made the mistake of trying to race through it too quickly, slipping on a rock and almost falling in. Finally, Kiba reached the wall of might, and this was where his stamina began to show signs of wear. Unlike Sasuke, he didn't climb as efficiently, using his sharp nails to cling to the wall but lacking the finesse to do it without exhausting himself. Still, he made it, and with a shout, he leapt across the finish line. Time, 4 minutes and 15 seconds. Next, it was Naruto's turn. He had a grin plastered across his face as he stood at the starting line, practically vibrating with energy. Naruto's journey was filled with less elegance and more sheer force of will. He blasted through the chakra activation gate with more enthusiasm than technique, but it worked. The force of agility was a bit of a mess, with Naruto tripping over vines and swinging wildly from ropes. Akamaru's speed and Sasuke's focus were not in his repertoire, but he kept pushing forward, laughing and shouting at the obstacles. By the time he hit the boulder roll, he had already used up a significant amount of energy. He struggled more than Kiba, but with a loud grunt, he finally managed to push the rock just enough to clear a path. The hidden trap slowed him down, and he barely avoided one of the swinging logs by sheer luck. The mudslide was just as bad for him as it was for everyone else, with Naruto slipping and sliding, as if he were in a mud wrestling match. The water crossing proved difficult too. He didn't quite have the same finesse as the others. Still, he managed to swim across, albeit in a clumsy, dogged manner. The wall of might was a struggle, and Naruto's muscles trembled with fatigue as he climbed. It wasn't pretty, but he made it. Finally, he sprinted across the finish line, falling into the dirt with a triumphant yell. Time, 4 minutes and 20 seconds. The rest of the class followed suit, each pushing themselves to the limit. Some succeeded, others faltered. Hinata managed a 4 minutes and 32 seconds finish. Choji took 4 minutes and 43 seconds, and Shikamaru, ever the strategic thinker, took 4 minutes and 50 seconds, despite his usual aversion to physical activity. Ino and Sakura finished with 4 minutes and 57 seconds, both looking thoroughly exhausted but proud of themselves nonetheless. As the last student crossed the finish line, everyone collapsed, sprawled out on the ground in a collective heap, gasping for breath. Irika's gaze softened as he looked over his students, a mix of concern and pride on his face. But he knew the drill. This was only the beginning. They had to be pushed to their limits if they were to improve. I stood there, watching them catch their breath, a small smirk playing on my lips. "You all did well," I said, "but this isn't enough. By the end of this year, I expect every single one of you to finish this course in under 3 minutes and 30 seconds. A universal groan rose from the class. "You're a slave driver, Shido-sensei," Shikamaru muttered, still panting from the effort. I laughed, crossing my arms. Don't get too comfortable. This is just the beginning. We've got a lot more work to do. As I began to write down everyone's scores, I could see the resolve in their eyes, tired, yes, but not defeated. They were ready to keep pushing forward. Rest up, I said, turning to face the exhausted group. Next class, sneaking. You're going to need all the energy you can get. Chapter 8, Naruto's Prank. The morning was still young when we made our way to the forest. The trees towered above us, their thick branches swaying in the gentle breeze, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch forever. I glanced around, taking in the stillness of the air, feeling the weight of the task ahead. Irika and I had gathered the students in this secluded area to test their stealth, an essential skill for any shinobi. You could be the strongest ninja in the world, but if you couldn't hide your presence, you'd never make it out of a mission alive. I stood at the edge of the group, arms crossed, as I surveyed the students. The challenge was simple enough. Hide and don't get caught. I glanced at Irika, who was already rolling up his sleeves with a slight grimace. He wasn't exactly thrilled with this lesson, but it was crucial, and he knew it. I couldn't help but think to myself how vital this skill had been in my past life. Being able to move unseen, to vanish in plain sight, it was an art every ninja had to master. The most effective shinobi were the ones who could manipulate their surroundings, blending into the shadows, vanishing without a trace. This, I thought, is where true ninja skills are born. I cleared my throat, getting the students' attention. All right, listen up. We're going to test your ability to hide your presence today. You've got 1 minute to find your spot in the forest. Irika and I will be searching for you. A chorus of yes, Shido-sensei, and murmurs filled the air, but I could see the uncertainty in their eyes. It wasn't as easy as it sounded, especially for some of them. Some might think that hiding in a tree was enough, but I wasn't so sure. Wait, Kiba shouted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Are we seriously playing hide and seek? This is ridiculous. I grinned. You could call it that, Kiba, but it's much more important than a game. It's a test. A ninja's life depends on their ability to hide, to move unnoticed. Kiba rolled his eyes. Yeah, whatever. Here's the deal, I added, my voice getting a little more serious. Those of you who get caught in the first 2 minutes will have to learn the basics of hiding your presence from Irika. The students gasped in unison, their faces going pale as the implications sank in. To be trained in the basics by Irika, that was punishment in itself. Irika shot me a look of betrayal, but I only shrugged, my grin widening. Irika, trying to mask his frustration, crossed his arms and glared at me. Hey, don't use me as punishment, Shido, he muttered under his breath. I leaned toward him and whispered with a chuckle. It's for their own good. Trust me, they need the motivation. Irika sighed deeply, shaking his head. His class has no respect for the basics. Reluctantly, he turned to the students. All right, kids, you have 1 minute to hide. When I finish counting, Shido and I will come looking for you. He started counting aloud, and the students scattered immediately, darting into the trees, underbrush, and bushes, trying to conceal themselves. I observed them carefully, noting how each one tried to blend in, some more successfully than others. As Irika continued to count, I found myself lost in thought. When I was younger, I would have hidden here, and if I'd been in this position, I'd have thought of every possible way to escape detection. It's not just about finding a good hiding spot. It's about making sure you leave no trace, no evidence of your presence. That's true skill. All right, that's it. Time's up, Irika said, his voice a little strained. Let's find them. And so, the search began. It didn't take long for Irika and me to start spotting the students. Kiba, though quick to run and hide, had underestimated his love of running. He had taken refuge behind a bush, but his excited panting gave him away instantly. I smirked as Irika zeroed in on him. Found you, Irika said, his tone amused. Damn it, Kiba grumbled, springing out from his hiding spot. This is stupid. I chuckled as Kiba stomped back toward the group, visibly annoyed but secretly relieved that his punishment wasn't going to be Irika's lesson in stealth. Next, we found Choji. His attempt at camouflage was simple. He tried to blend in with the ground. The only problem was, he blended too well, to the point that it was obvious where his large frame had disturbed the surrounding earth. Irika found him with ease. "Come on, Choji. You're better than this," I teased. Choji scratched the back of his head, sheepish. "Guess I'm not as good at hiding as I thought." Hinata was a little more successful, hiding behind a tree where her small frame helped her stay hidden. It took us about 2 minutes to find her, which wasn't bad, considering her quiet nature. She blushed when we approached but remained composed, not letting the failure get to her. "Good effort, Hinata," I said as she made her way back to the group. Then there was Shikamaru, who, predictably, had hidden in a spot that required zero effort. He had just laid down beneath a large tree, hoping that his stillness would help him blend in. It took longer to find him, because Irika almost passed by the tree without noticing. I shook my head in disbelief. "Lazy as always," I muttered as Irika spotted him, causing Shikamaru to groan. After less than 2 minutes, we had already found most of the students. Only Sasuke and Naruto remained. Sasuke, of course, was probably the most skilled at this game, hiding with precision, blending perfectly with the shadows. It took me a little over 3 minutes to find him. I spotted him crouched behind a rock. His eyes narrowed as he waited for the right moment to move. When I crept up behind him, I could hear his breathing, steady, controlled, but the slightest twitch of his shoulder gave him away. I stepped forward and tapped his shoulder. Sasuke looked up, surprised, his face an unreadable mask. "Not bad, Sasuke," I said, noting the irritation in his eyes. "You're not the last one to be found, though." Sasuke scowled as he got to his feet. "I should have been last." "Well," I said, "the last one to be found gets the prize of being found last. Besides, that's part of the challenge, isn't it?" Sasuke grumbled, but didn't argue as he walked back to the group. That left only one person, Naruto. Irika and I searched for him for what seemed like an eternity. 10 minutes passed, and still there was no sign of him. "Where the hell is he?" I thought, growing increasingly annoyed. I'd underestimated him. The kid was tricky. Then, suddenly, I heard Irika curse under his breath. I turned to see him holding up a figure by the back of his jumpsuit, a disgruntled expression on his face. It was Naruto, laughing hysterically. "Found you," Irika said, his voice a little too cheerful to hide the frustration. But it wasn't the fact that he had found Naruto that caught my attention. It was what he had found him with. Irika was completely covered in yellow and orange paint. The look on his face was pure bewilderment, like he had just woken up to the worst surprise of his life. "What happened?" I asked, trying to stifle my laughter as the students gathered around, staring at the sight. Naruto, still giggling, pointed at Irika's flak jacket. "You should have seen the look on your face when you stepped on that wire," he howled, doubling over with laughter. Irika's face turned red with embarrassment, and a vein popped on his forehead. "I should have known better than to trust that kid," he muttered, then glared at me. "Shido, you set me up." I couldn't contain myself anymore. The image of Irika, who had been so careful and calculated, caught in such a simple prank, was too much. I burst out laughing, and the students followed suit, some of them clutching their sides as they tried to catch their breath. "You've got to admit," I said, wiping away a tear of laughter, "Naruto really knows how to stay hidden." Naruto perked up, still laughing but clearly proud of himself. I could have done better if it wasn't Irika looking for me. Irika's eye twitched. I should have known better than to follow that kid into the woods. I chuckled. "Well, Naruto, I'd say you've won. You stayed hidden for over 10 minutes and got the best score." Naruto puffed out his chest. "Yeah, I'm the best." The bell rang, signaling the end of the school day. Irika, still covered in paint, sighed deeply. "I'm going to wash this off. I'll see you at the academy." I shook my head, still smiling as I gestured for the students to follow me. "Let's go back to class. Time to grab your things and head home." As we walked back, I reflected on the day's events. Despite the chaos and the pranks, I couldn't help but feel that in their own way, the students were starting to understand. They might be a little rough around the edges, but as long as they kept up this kind of determination, they'd make it. They'd survive, and maybe even thrive. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey here at Visionary Audiobook. I hope you enjoyed the story as much as I enjoyed bringing it to life for you. If you like what you heard, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an adventure. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. Until next time, Keep your imagination alive, and I'll see you in the next story.